Quick disclaimer before you listen. The World's Okayest Medic Podcast is an educational and commentary platform produced and recorded by me. What we say on here is not endorsed by any of our employers, and we are not speaking on behalf of our employers. Our commentary is our own. Finally, remember to follow your local protocols.
It is that time. It is Saturday morning coffee talk. And this actually may be the last coffee talk before. Actually, let me look at no, I think next week. No, I was going to say this might be the last coffee talk while I am officially in my early 40s and I trespass into my mid 40s. But no, we still have one more week to hang on. This coffee talk may get a little bit on the spicy side. Don't they all? But I have some thoughts with this one, and I have some things to say. I'm not really going to hold back. So a couple of things before we get going. I recorded, look to drop on Monday. It was supposed to be about pediatric blood administration with Dr. Mark Peel, inventor of the LifeFlow device from 410 Medical, and Dr. Peter Antevi, who is the EMS medical director from Florida for a bunch of agencies, and you all know and love him because of his work, his company, Hantevi, a great system. I had both of them come on to talk about pediatric blood administration and dispel some of the myths that you were hearing. And it turned into a whole discussion. We covered everything from pediatric blood to scoop and run to dual sequential defibrillation, the AHA updates. We covered it all. It was such a great episode, and it was fun to record. It was data-driven. I'm not going to bang on the table like I'm doing. It was data-driven. There was evidence supplied. There was a very academic discussion, but we could have filmed this, recorded it in my garage while we were drinking beers because we had a great time doing it. So stay tuned. Monday that is dropping. And this past Monday, I had James Johns, who's a paramedic. I think he's also a nurse and firefighter from Florida, come on to talk about his mobile stroke unit in the Villages, Florida. And I have always been a skeptic of the mobile stroke units. And he and I have, over the last few years since I started the podcast, he's been an early listener, an early follower, and he's messaged me many times. He's reposted my stuff. I had virtually communicated with him a bunch of times, found him to be an extremely nice guy. And he reached out and was like, hey, I know you're a skeptic with mobile stroke units. I want to challenge you on this. And I'd like to, if you're interested, come on to the podcast and talk about it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to talk about mobile stroke units. I think I've covered this before, but he's been such a nice guy and such a dedicated listener that I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'll have him come on. Why not? Less content for me to write and record. So we recorded it, and I was blown away by how great of a discussion we had and how much I learned and how much I've begun to rethink my thoughts about mobile stroke units. And I have heard this from like 5 different people since I posted it the other day, and people who are in leadership positions and educator positions. And they reached out and they were like, I never knew all this about mobile stroke units. That is absolutely amazing. And they're like, and now I'm racking my brain thinking if that might actually work in our area. So go ahead and listen to that episode. Every now and then, as a content creator, you go to record content that you thought is going to be, okay, I'm going to record this content. It's going to be good. I'm going to get it out there. And it ends up being A+ top shelf content. That's how the discussion with James Johns was. And it was all him. It wasn't me. I just sat there like a blithering idiot going, Isn't the Villages that swinger colony down south? Go listen to the episode. Challenge yourself. That's what we like to do on this podcast. And go listen to it. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this Saturday morning coffee talk. Last coffee talk, I discussed hybrid programs and some reciprocity issues associated with hybrid programs. And I took a snippet of that, like I usually do when I record a podcast, and I posted it as a reel on Instagram. And it generated a lot of discussion. I got lots of DMs. There were a bunch of comments on the reel. There was some discussion in the comments. And then I did an impromptu Instagram live with Dan Rowell. Thank you, Dan, for coming on. And it's posted up if anybody wants to listen to it. a couple people asked me if I could turn it into a podcast and publish it like it was an actual podcast. And I tried, I couldn't figure out how to do it. So what I did is I saved it to Instagram. I usually just delete the lives as soon as they're done, but it's on my Instagram page. You can find it, and I allowed for it to be downloaded by people. So I don't exactly know how it works. I guess you can download it and listen to it at your leisure, so it doesn't have to stream on your phone like while you're driving. So that's what I did. And thank you, Dan, for coming on. It was totally spur of the moment. I texted him. I was like, hey, I'm bored. I got a half hour to kill. You want to do an Instagram live? And we talked about hybrid classes at length. So there was a comment on the Instagram reel that kind of pissed me off. And I've said this a million times. I generally don't get spun up by the comments, but this one it was one of those, how dare you say this comment? And it was, you're casting hybrid programs under one big umbrella. Not all hybrid programs are bad. You shouldn't be saying that you're not going to get a good education with a hybrid program. And I don't know why you're telling people not to do it, because if a state is an NREMT state, I'm not sure what that means. They have to accept any accredited program, whether a hybrid program or not. And the reason I read this comment, was ticked off by it, is because if you actually listened to the podcast and listened to the content, you would know that I was not shitting on hybrid programs. You would actually know that I said, I think you can get a good education from a hybrid program, and that there are pros and cons to hybrid programs. I think, whether people like it or not, that hybrid programs are going to become more of a thing, and that they are part of the way of the future, and that we need to get on board with it. That's what I have said all along. So I never said you're going to get a shitty education with a hybrid program. I said I think some students would struggle with a hybrid program without having an instructor. I think there are valid issues with not having face-to-face interaction with an instructor, but that is not what I said. Two, the information supplied in the comment was inaccurate, that if it is a national registry state, again, I don't know what that means, they have to accept any accredited program. And that is absolutely incorrect. Yes, there is an EMS compact. Yes, I think there should be an EMS compact. I completely agree with that, but not every state is on board. And whether the state requires national registry or not, the state can do whatever they damn well please when it comes to licensure. If you have national registry, if you have a national registry card, you've been a paramedic for 20 years, and you apply to, we'll just say, Montana as an example. I don't know what the requirements are in Montana. I'm just using it as an example. If Montana wants, they can say, in order for you to get reciprocity, we have to watch you eat an entire rhubarb pie in one sitting live here at the office. And then, by the way, there is a Hungarian wrestler named Tiny that you have to successfully pin before we will grant you reciprocity. And that is their right to do as a state. I'm not getting into a state rights discussion or a civics 101 discussion, but the National Registry has absolutely no say over what a state can or cannot do. What is the National Registry going to do to New Jersey for saying, hey, we're not accepting a person with the National Registry card who completed this hybrid program? What are they going to do? Say, hey, we're pulling out of New Jersey? Like, no, that's not a thing. And like, they cannot compel the governor, nor the legislature, nor any bureaucratic agency to do anything. So know your state, know the regs, know the rules, and more reason for an EMS compact, in my opinion. Now, that is also not me saying that I think it's okay that states can do this. I am just saying that this is the reality of reciprocity and licensure in the United States. Again, a compact is the way to go. I vehemently do not agree with the New Jersey Office of EMS denying these applications. I don't know anybody from the New Jersey Office of EMS. I've gotten several messages from people, and they've name dropped, and they're like, oh, I can't believe Jim Bob did this. I don't know what kind of a hair Cindy has up her ass causing this. I don't know any of these people. I don't know if these are educated advocates in the office who are truly doing things to try to better things in the state, or whether this is some bureaucratic paper medic, paper pusher who wouldn't know patient care if it hit them in the face, arbitrarily making decisions. I don't know, but that is the reality. Know your state, know the rules, and know whether your program is going to be accepted by somewhere you want to work or may want to work in the future. Rant on that over. Next topic. I was having a conversation with somebody and they gave me a nice hit of dopamine. And he said, how does it feel to have more reach than gems? And I think he's right, actually. If you go, and I don't want to be like Trump here and be like, if you go look at the likes on their page and then you look at the likes on my Instagram, it's not even close, the views. It is the truth. I appear to have much more traction, at least in the social media sphere, than GEMS and EMS Magazine. And they do their conferences every year. Those conferences are big. But past that, I think the print, and it's now mostly digital print, that is a dying breed. I used to read those all the time in 2002 and 2003 when I was starting and was like, wow, these are really good journals. There are some good articles. I'm prepping for the podcast on mobile stroke units. I found a really excellent article on mobile stroke units in EMS world. Yeah, you do read some excellent articles. Friends of mine have published in those publications. I have published an article in EMS world in 2020, I think. But the content is getting polluted. The content is very advertiser heavy, and it's a lot of repeat stuff. And it's a lot of the same old, getting older voices. So I have this conversation with this guy who tells me like, hey, you've got more reach than GEMS, EMS Magazine, or EMS, whatever it's called now. And then somebody pointed me to look at this one group of EMS consultants. And I looked at the group and it was a lot of hanger-oners from the old era of people who used to publish and do the conference circuit. And I thought, oh my God, will you guys just hang it up and let it go? I have to be honest, what I have been seeing in those circuits is a cast of aged out carcasses who are struggling to stay relevant. I know that sounds really mean, but I'm just being honest here. I never want to be somebody like that. Now, I think that we must respect people for their past accomplishments and we must honor them for that. And we must also solicit input from people who have lots and lots and lots of experience. And the only way to get lots and lots and lots of experience is with time. And with time comes age. So just because somebody is older and they've been on the job for decades does not mean that they are some old fogey that we should just roll our eyes and go, okay, pop up, thanks. No, we need to solicit their input because there is wisdom in that. We can't ignore all of that. But there does come a time when age, and I got to look over at my notes here because I wrote this down before and I don't think I can eloquently say it off the top of my head. There is a paradox because there is a point in time where one's decades of knowledge and wisdom becomes like anything else that gets old. Not what it once was, decayed, inaccurate, and behind the times. If you ask me, there comes a time where it's a cliff you have fallen off of. And I think some of these voices are becoming like that, and they stick around because they're struggling to stay relevant. I will forever refuse to be like that. And if I ever get like that, I know you all will tell me. I am very selective in who I listen to and who I consume content from and who I attend education by. I'm not sure if that was correct English. I have a real problem when somebody is so far removed from actually doing the job and they are up on a stage or writing articles or shaping minds and telling people this is how you should be doing things. This is my expert opinion on this. Now, I haven't touched a patient in 10, 15, 20 years, but this is how you should be doing things. Now, Paul Sheets and I talked a little bit about this. I think that if you are teaching the fundamentals like patho, how to read an EKG, anatomy, the physiology of pulmonology, things like that, if you have been an educator professionally for 25 years and haven't touched a patient since back then, you can teach those fundamentals just fine. But when it comes to teaching somebody how to be a paramedic or how to be an EMT or how to be whatever, a nurse, doctor, when you're teaching how to and you're opining on where the industry should go, if you haven't been doing the job in so many years, I don't think you have relevancy. It becomes like Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite for younger people, because I had to look, when was Napoleon Dynamite? And it was 2004. And I thought, oh my God, I am getting old. I thought that was out like 5 years ago. But Uncle Rico was the uncle who was the star football player in high school and is now in his 40s and is still living the glory days of the time he was a high school football star. And nobody gives a fuck about that when you are in your mid 40s. I don't know. I just get very judgmental, and I wanted to talk about it on this Saturday morning coffee talk because it's raw, unfiltered, and I say my opinions out here. So I said that I will never become one of these irrelevant has-beens. There will come a time when this podcast will stop. It's not going to be anytime soon. I have no plans to stop. I think I am at a high point, and honestly, I think I'm at a high point where it's getting a little higher. But like everything else in life, there's going to come a point of descent where you have to go, do I go out on a high note? Do I descend a little bit and start to trail off? Or do I become one of these irrelevant carcasses like I've described? And I will never do that. There will come a time when this podcast will stop. And that's a random dumping of a thought. So the next thing to talk about, and look, look, people are going to get hot and bothered when I say what I'm going to say on here. So sorry, not sorry. And as you listen on, my buddy who messaged me on Patreon about the initial question about the hybrid programs, whose wife said, oh my God, this guy's a douchebag. He's always complaining about something. Well, tell her to go in the other room or put some AirPods in while you listen to this, because you're about to hear some stuff. I'm also going to show a little personal vulnerability here, which I hate doing, but it is necessary. So last Saturday morning coffee talk, I told you all about how I am exiting HEMS and how I put my notice into the flight team that I am done, and that it is what prompted me to do this was a minor schedule change at my full-time job, my ground job, which was going to interfere with my flight schedule. And it made me think that I am sick of doing two jobs. It's time to just chill out a little bit. I'm working too much. That is all true. So I put in my notice and I had 8 more shifts and pause. Let me backtrack and then I will come back to where I was talking. I think it was October 6th was the fatal Reach Air Medical crash in Sacramento. And that crash, and this is, people get upset when you talk about crashes, and people get upset when you talk about crashes and they're fresh. I'm sorry. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. So I watched that crash. That crash was captured on bystander film from like a gazillion different angles. And I watched every single video of that crash. And I thought, oh my God, that could happen to me. And in my subsequent shifts after watching that reel, when I would get in a helicopter, I thought, is today going to be the day that we fall out of the sky? Is this the flight? Now, I didn't become panicked or anything. I didn't have this phobia or like this rapid heartbeat. No, I just was very keenly aware of my mortality when we would come to altitude. Pause again. Let me say that my flight team is amazing. We are the best in the business. And that sounds very cocky, but I want to be emphatic that any issues I have or that I'm going to talk about are not with my flight team. From management to the mechanics to the pilots to my coworkers. We use crew resource management. We have a culture of safety. I have never once felt any pressure to fly or any scintilla of shit for turning down a flight. I I truly think that we do it right. And the pilots are amazing. I trust all of the pilots. They're highly skilled. The mechanics, I know everybody goes, "Oh, we can't forget the mechanics." No, the mechanics are they're the most integral part of the team, if you ask me, because they make that helicopter flyable. Our mechanics are amazing. I have watched them work. The care and organization and passion with which they work on a helicopter is unbelievable. So the issues I'm going to talk about are with the HEMS industry in general. My team is absolutely phenomenal. Okay. I told you that I put in my notice because my schedule, blah, 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 and that I watched that early October Reach Air Medical crash, starting to ponder my mortality. And I would think, is this going to be the one where we crash? It was more in the front of my head than it was like latently in the back of my head the last 11 years of my career. So I put in my notice and I had 8 shifts left. I go in for shift 1 of 8, the Friday before I recorded the last coffee talk. We did a flight and it was a fine flight. The weather was good. There were no issues. It was my usual crew. Absolutely nothing bad happened. But when we got to altitude, I looked out the window and I thought, I don't like this anymore. I wasn't terrified. There was no heart pounding. We picked up, we treated the patient, we flew back. And for only the second time ever in my career, we went skids down at the base. And I thought, oh my God, thank God we are back at the base. The first time it happened, there was a little bit of an issue and we landed. And I was like, oh, thank God, that was a while ago. But this was the first time we did a normal flight ever where there was no issue and it went swimmingly perfectly. And when we landed, I thought, oh my God, thank God we are on the ground. So a few hours later, we get put on standby for another flight. And I just thought, I don't want to go on this flight. I really hope they cancel it. And they did. And I felt relieved. And that is not a good mindset to be in because I am a workhorse. I am a workaholic. I show up to work. I want to be busy. I want to be doing the job. I want things to be spicy. And I thought, I don't want to work these remaining 7 shifts. So I got off shift. I left work rather quickly. I normally hang around and bullshit with people. And I got in my car and I left the base. And I thought, I don't know what the hell that was. I don't want to do these remaining 7 shifts. I have a very, very bad feeling about it. And then a couple hours later, I see that Vanderbilt had a helicopter crash. And I thought, if it could happen to them, because they're a top tier program, it could happen to us. And I got in my head. I spent the next few days spinning about it in my head, talking to people. I talked to Steve Wood. I talked to one of my medical directors in Pennsylvania. And I talked to a couple other friends and they all were like, dude, if you have a bad feeling, do not get back in a helicopter. And I was thinking, dude, you are just nuts. This is just an idea you've gotten in your head. And I've never been like this before. I'm not a risk averse person. I am generally not scared to do things, but I had a really bad feeling. And seeing that I had a bad feeling and then Vanderbilt crashing, that put me in overdrive. And I was like, I don't want to get into a helicopter again. So I was racking my brain and I was telling myself, you are crazy. You have an excellent team of mechanics. You have never felt not safe. You've got excellent managers. You have a culture of safety. We use crew resource management. You are going to be fine for 7 shifts. And then I thought, how many of these programs that have had a fatal crash have the crew said that at some point? Like, you've got great mechanics, all the blah, blah, blah. And I was extraordinarily stressed. And I'm laying in bed. I'm thinking about all of this. And I've got my youngest kid next to me, and she's telling me she's reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. She's reading her book, and she's telling me about the whole plot that I don't understand. I didn't even hear what she was saying because I was thinking about things and I just hear her in my ear. And I thought, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Do not get back on a helicopter. Just quit. Just suck it up and tell them you're not getting back on a helicopter. So, long story short, I talked to my boss and I'm done. I'm not getting back on a helicopter. Again, to reiterate, my issue is not with my team. My team is amazing. This is my second team, as you know. My first team, I left because I didn't like the culture. I thought the staff, it was a toxic work environment. But the same thing with my last team. We were safe. Our operations were phenomenal. So no issues. Nothing has prompted this that I have experienced at work. But something is very, very wrong with the HEMS industry in general. Why are so many fucking helicopters falling out of the sky? I spent one night, I couldn't sleep. I was up all night and I compiled a list. I am pulling it up of just near miss incidents that I am aware of that, and they weren't on my team, but near miss incidents of teams in my area. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just off the top of my head that I thought of in like 5 minutes. And then I wrote just off the top of my head without Googling it, fatal air medical accidents that I am aware of from the past years. And we have Air Evac in Kentucky, Maryland State Police, REMSA, Penn Star, Air Evac in Oklahoma, Reach Air Medical, Vanderbilt, University of Mississippi, Haynes Flight in Alabama, and there are many more that I couldn't think of off the top of my head. So I Googled it, and there are indeed many, many more. I am not afraid to fly. I would get on a commercial airliner tomorrow without batting an eye. I would put my kids on a commercial airliner and send them to Paris or whatever. And my level of concern would be probably around the same level of concern that I have with them being in a car driving to school with my wife. Very low risk. This is not the 1990s where commercial airliners were falling out of the sky all the time, but it is happening with HEMS. And here's what I think is going to piss people off. I see the same thing every time there is a helicopter crash. I see black bands over the logo of the program that was affected. I see pictures of the dead crew members smiling in their flight suits. I see anecdotes and biographies about how amazing they were, which indeed I'm sure all of them were amazing people. I see notes about their sacrifice, and we talk about what happened with the crashes and we say what lessons can be learned. But at the end of the day, I see absolutely nothing change. And like lemmings off of a cliff, I see us getting right back on helicopters and doing the exact same thing day and night, 24/7, 365, and just waiting for that game of chance. Who's it going to be next? I have not seen much change in the air medical industry since I started in 2014. And there have been a lot of fucking crashes since then. A lot of people have died. And I am sick of seeing the same crap, the same black bands, the same drama, the same, oh my God, we must honor they gave their lives, a hero's death. And sorry, if you die trapped in an anvil that is falling out of the sky, going to pick up a 35-year-old with a PE who was on a heparin drip, or some 99-year-old with a catastrophic IPH to send them to a neuro intervention surgery center because Pearl's a fighter and the family wants everything done, but everybody knows damn well that a neurosurgeon is not going to touch that patient and that patient is going to die a couple hours later. I don't know if I can say that that is a hero's death or that you are sacrificing your life for something meaningful. I'm sorry, I said it. Oh, and by the way, here's another thing. This could be like the hybrid thing. Like, oh, how dare you said that? I can't believe you say that. You're lumping all of this under one umbrella. I think that if you get into a HEMS aircraft that is single engine, I think that you are playing Russian roulette. And that is not just me who has said this. I've heard pilots and I've heard mechanics say that before. I like the HEMS industry. I believe in it. We render great care. We provide a very necessary service of moving patients quickly from point A to point B to get life-saving definitive care. And we give great care in between to stabilize the patient, to get them there alive. I do believe in HEMS. I really do. But for me, and this is a very personal decision, it may not be for you, it may not be for your friends, but for me, the risk is no longer acceptable. Something is up with all of these helicopters falling out of the sky. And I think we need to have some uncomfortable conversations. And I think I'm going to get shit from people for saying this, but something needs to change. What? I don't know. I have some thoughts. I'm going to develop them and formulate them better before I start blathering into a microphone about it. I do not have an axe to grind with the industry, but I do think that things need to change. Stay tuned. And I'm sorry to get so heavy for a Saturday morning coffee talk, but somebody needs to say it, and I don't see a lot of people saying it. So some people have said it, but it's not being said enough. And I've got this big platform, and I'm saying it. So said the quiet part out loud. That is it. That is Saturday morning coffee talk. I love you all. Be safe out there.